So I have spoken already about the 5 Garou tribes that I consider to be the largest impediment to the greater efforts that the Garou profess to have in terms of trying to save the world. This time, I'm going to talk about the 5 tribes that I feel, in different ways, are the most kind of grounded in the lives of common humanity, and probably, in their own ways, the best set up to survive in the long term. The Meek among them. I mean, obviously, you can't talk about the Meek tribes without bringing up Bonars first and foremost. They are the other side of the two urban tribes, whereas the Glasswalkers walk around trying to imitate vampires and, live among and infiltrate the upper echelons of human society. The Bonars are scavengers who live on the edges and outskirts. They breed and live amongst the poor and the homeless. They originated in North Africa, not Egypt, but west of Egypt. So that would make their original ancestors people like the Berbers or Numidians, or possibly even the lower, caste levels of Carthage. But they're like the children of Gaia, and that they've largely kind of jumped away from those ethnicities in the millennia since their inception. And as cities spread around the world, Bonars followed them, and so they just would kind of just breed it in with whatever the local population was. They're very much, as a tribe, kind of reunited and strongly identified themselves with the idea of America and the American dream, and this new globally integrated, emergent super race kind of thing going on over here. And like low key, despite the fact that like they're the two tribes on this list that gets derided the most by other werewolves, and kind of by extension by the player base of the game. They have one of the largest populations, and they're not disloyal to Gaia in the same way that the Glasswalkers are. They're also more genuinely interested in being heroic, and like standing up for the little people, and not necessarily being the sort of like ravenous monsters that the more wilderness dwelling Garou tribes tend to just kind of slide towards naturally. Hand in hand with the Bonars, you also have to bring up the children of Gaia. They originally came out of Mesopotamia, but like the Bonars, they spread with civilization, and you find them in pockets all around the world, having like bred into like a lot of different local populations and all that kind of stuff, and so on. So they don't really have a particular ethnic identity of their own anymore, unlike some of the other tribes. They're the peaceniks. I personally myself argue that of all the tribes, they're probably the ones that should be in charge of things in terms of coordinated efforts. However, they're a bit too soft-spoken perhaps, and so it's always, comes down to basically a wrestling match between Silver Fangs and Shadow Lords over who gets to be top dog. But I feel like their role and things is vastly overlooked. Much like the Stargazers, they show like more wisdom and control over themselves, and wanting peace amongst the tribes so that they can all focus their efforts better. Like is not the same as like wanting to lay down arms and declare a truce with Pentex and the Worm or anything like that. So. Their effectiveness as warriors and all that is not diminished. Like as I've said before, it doesn't matter who the fuck you are, shapeshift into Krynos form, suddenly you're a killing rage machine. The Uktena I would put on this list. They're the southwestern Central American descended werewolves. Sister to the Wendigo tribe, who's like kind of more of a Canadian, Northeast American, Pacific Northwest kind of group. They've spread their breeding lines further out, whereas the Wendigo are, you know, adamant about trying to maintain like pure Native American bloodlines. The Uktena have been more open-minded about mixing with a lot of the races that had once been subjected during the colonial period and all that kind of stuff. So you'll find Mexican Uktena, Black Uktena, all that kind of stuff. They're very spiritual in nature. They still carry, you know, they still are at their core Native American, you know, tribe and philosophy and all that. You know, very like Pueblo, Navajo kind of vibe going on, Anasazi kind of shit. So in some ways, like from an outsider point of view, you know, like people would almost view the Uktena as being a bit more civilized than the Wendigo, perhaps, although that's, you know, based on some bad distortions of things. But you know, because they're not as narrow-minded as the Wendigo, their traditions have a better chance of being preserved forward in history. Because they're not so uncompromising on who they're willing to, like, you know, pass the torch on to. The important thing is that they maintain their tribal obligations to keep a bunch of powerful ancient evil entities bound up in a bunch of wards that they had established a long time ago. And so in many ways it's important for them to not allow themselves to die out just because they want to stubbornly attach themselves to one particular human ethnicity or another. Speaking of human ethnicities, then we'll lead to the last two, are both derivatives of the old British Isles. The Fianna, an Irish tribe of werewolves that has also kind of, you know, filled in some gaps left over in England and Scotland in particular because of the other tribe I'll bring up in a minute. Especially in terms of like the American story, or really you just look throughout the course of human history. You know, the Fianna are supposed to be the tribe that kind of mirrors the Celtic groups of humans from you know, ancient pre-Roman Europe and on through modern history. And the story of the Celtics is one of a very like long, slow decline from once being, you know, very widespread to being ever more pushed into, you know, the western corners of the continent and then eventually the Isles. Before able to, you know, join in the great human migration over here to North America and South America, where now they have a much larger gene expression in terms of descendants than they actually have in the places that were once, long time ago, their homelands. Because of that, you know, the Fianna are like a very American tribe themselves, many of them with like Scots-Irish or Irish ancestry. And, you know, so they come with all that kind of stereotypical baggage in terms of like what kind of werewolves they are, you know, with all the Celtic knot tattoos and wearing tors and being, you know, ribald, bar-hopping minstrels and all that kind of shit. You know, you get that out of the Fianna, but, you know, they're common man's blue-collar kind of werewolf tribe, unlike, you know, it's like some of their contemporaries like the Silver Fangs or Geta Fenris or Shadow Lords, who also have like specific Western ethnic groupings that their tribes are associated with you know, slightly different attitudes and slightly different histories. And then finally, I'll also bring up the Black Spiral Dancers, the original Scotsmen, before the people who currently call themselves Scottish moved to Scotland. The Picts are the ancestors of the Black Spiral Dancers, and yes, they're the evil tribe, but I mean, does that, and it also, especially in context of the World of Darkness setting, make them quite embedded and aligned with the nature of humankind and all that kind of such? I feel, you know, they're by focusing so much as villains, I feel like they're oft overlooked for the role they do still play in like the active story of werewolf kind. They're separated out a bit too much. Whereas, you know, you can do things with them like, you know, have a player character's actually really the last White Howler, and you got the Black Spiral Dancers coming after him, and all that kind of, you know, classic 90s storytelling. You know, I feel like in and of itself, like the Black Spiral Dancers, like, you know, can have a redemption arc without having to, like, somehow be magically reverted back to their pre-corruption form. So anyway, though, there you go. There's the 5 meekest of the werewolf tribes. Be sure to leave comments, hit like, and subscribe. And as always, ow.